Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of the Young Black Suburban. Your host, Tim Witherspoon Jr. And today we have another guest that is one of my favorite kind of guests to have, an actor, also a teacher, Scott Langdon. How you doing, Scott?
Good, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
You know, me and you, throughout you becoming a member of my gym, have had tons of conversations about all sorts of things, and I figured it's time to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, that's great. That's awesome. Thank you.
No problem. So you're an actor.
Yes.
But your roots started where? Here in Bristol? Is that where you were raised?
No, I was born in Essington.
Okay.
Tinicum, right by the airport.
Yeah.
My parents grew up right across the street from each other.
Okay.
Where my grandparents worked at Westinghouse during the Second World War, and so my parents grew up across the street from each other, and I was born there, and then when I was 10, we moved into South Jersey. So
so
just
nowhere
right across
near
the bridge.
Bristol yet.
Not yet, no.
Right.
Yeah, and then oddly, I went to school in Oklahoma City. I went to college there and I ended up meeting my wife there, my first wife, and lived there for 13 years. We had our 2 kids were born there, and then we moved back up here. Actually, just before 9/11 happened, that summer of 2001, we moved back up here and lived in Plainsboro, New Jersey, Central Jersey, and raised our kids there. And then when the kids went away to college, things kind of changed, and ended up here in Bristol. So I've been here in Bristol for 6 years, I think.
Okay. How did I get the impression that you've been here your whole life? You must be just fit right in.
Yeah, I know. Bristol just I love this borough. Yeah,
right.
And especially the past couple of years with the pandemic and having been confined to home, and just spending a lot of time here, just taking a lot of photographs and walking my dog, and just spending a lot of time in the quiet, and by the river, and just it feels like I've been here forever in a lot of ways.
Place, man. But growing up with your parents, starting out in Essington, I fought there actually before. There's a bar that's right on the waterfront, the Deck or something it was called.
Okay.
I fought there. Anyway.
Nice.
How was your household growing up? You had both parents in the house and everything. How was your upbringing?
Yeah, my parents were both public school teachers, and we were raised in suburban New Jersey, South Jersey. I have 2 younger brothers who were 2.5 years younger, and then almost 5 years younger, so 2 younger than me. And I have both parents in the house. We were raised in a pretty conservative Christian environment. I went to school my first 4 years out in Oklahoma in a Christian college, and for my first 4 years, and then went to graduate school elsewhere. But so that was always, sort of prominent in the family growing up.
Yeah. So, school all year round.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you decide, once you get to university, to become a teacher yourself, or what was your field of choice?
Well, I've been an actor for over 40 years now. I started out as a young person, and all through my high school years and college years, working professionally as well as going to school and things. But when we moved back up here in 2001, after I had gone to graduate school and had done some work down there in Oklahoma City, and we moved back up here in 2001, and I was moving to get my acting career up here going, and started working in the Philadelphia community at the Art and Theater, and then at the Walnut Street Theater. And in 2003, I was doing a production of Evita there, and my daughter, who was 8 at the time, and my son was 4, she got on my lap on one of my days off and just started crying and said, we don't see you, and you're not here. And, she was right. It's 8 shows a week. The only day we have off is Monday. And That just wasn't enough time to really be with my kids when they were young. So I said, okay, that's it, and went into teaching in the public schools.
Right.
And did that for the next 8 years.
Now, is that what you had your degree in?
Yeah, my degree is, I have a master's in vocal music,
Okay.
a bachelor's in vocal music and a master's in vocal music. And then when I went into teaching, I ended up doing a program through the Elizabeth School District in Elizabeth, New Jersey, where I got my teaching certificate in a sort of an alternative program there. So I was kind of teaching and going to school at night to take the education classes. So it was sort of an on-the-job training kind of a program as a music teacher. So I was the music teacher for elementary schools.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, elementary school could be a rough place. You're dealing with young kids and everything. I have a 9-year-old, so I don't like elementary school. How was it as a teacher being there? Probably a different experience for you. You get to see kids grow up, right? Yeah,
it was great. I mean, the first few years, I taught in Elizabeth for 4 years, and the first 3 I taught at one elementary school, so it was K through 8. And luckily, my children were young at the time. I had a girl and a boy, and they were around that age, so it wasn't so foreign to me to see the kids at that age. But I went from, in 2008, in the fall, I went from the elementary school level to seniors in high school when I took a position at East Brunswick High School, which was closer to where we were living. And that went from literally, as it turned out, a Friday I was working with the 4 and 5-year-olds in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and then Monday I took over in my new job, and it was seniors in high school. So I was, on the Friday, I had kids who were coming into the program, and then on Monday it was leading them out into the world. It was very strange.
Yeah. Like you're going from teaching the kid how to tie a shoe to like preparing someone to have to do taxes almost. That's a far spectrum. So what are some of the things that you enjoyed the most about teaching at all?
Well, I love what I think education needs to get more into and be more about, and that is not necessarily what to think, but how to think. So teaching critical thinking and how, you're going to get all kinds of ideas, and especially now today with technology being what it is, kids are going to get information and things from all kinds of places. And so it's, how do I discern, what is right for me and what is not, and what do I, how do I sort of manage all that information and think critically about it. So teaching things in music, like not just how to sing a song or how to play a song, but, is this song good? What makes a song good or not? Why do a lot of people think this particular song is a hit? What makes it, those kind of things. How are we thinking?
It sounds a little bit like Common Core. Like you have a math problem, we all know how to get to the answer, but to think of a different way to get to the answer, you're trying to open up different channels. And like you said, there's so much information out here for kids to find and all that. And how do they manage it? How do parents even think about having to manage it? Because we never had to, So how do you get down to the core of a kid and help them understand what the world is today? How do you do that?
It starts, I think, with curiosity, finding out what a child is curious naturally about. What are the kind of things that hold their attention? What are the kind of things that they keep going to time after time? I remember when my kids were little, especially, my daughter would spend a lot of time in her room by herself with her Disney Barbies. And at first you might think, she's in her room by herself with Barbies, what could she be doing? And she'd leave the door, we had to leave the door open a crack. But if we would walk by, we would hear her making up stories and giving this dialogue over here to this one, and just sort of letting her do that. And then if she would share that with us, maybe helping her with stories. And, now she's an editor and a writer, right? So that was the thing that was curious. And so we just sort of, instead of thinking, oh, she's in a room all the time, and just thought, well, what is she doing in there?
Kind of nurturing the habit a little bit.
Yeah.
Going with it, yeah. Now, you mentioned that you've been acting for a long time. What would you say, how many years?
Over 40 years now.
Over 40 years. What gave you the acting bug?
I think at first it's because I was such a young kid doing something that made people laugh or pay attention and then applaud. You get that feeling of applause or doing something well.
Performing.
Yeah, but as I grew older and could kind of articulate what that feeling was more and more, I realized it was about the connection between me, what I was doing, and the audience that was receiving, and the energy that they were giving back to me, and then the energy I was giving them. And so you're in this sort of circle, and that connection was what really attracted me and it kept me going in terms of the audience. But just in terms of the art itself, it's the storytelling, taking a character from one place and seeing where they go to in another place.
Right. To me, that explanation sounds a little bit like it was like a drug to you. Like when the audience responded well to your performance, that kind of kept you going and kept you fed you. Is that a correct assumption? I think
so, yeah. In a real general way, it's whenever you get a good feeling about something that you're doing, you sort of want to follow that good feeling and do more. I imagine, I know when we spar here in the gym, and you're in the corner and I'm doing something right, and you say, hey, that's right, and I can feel like, that did feel right.
I can actually see it on your face.
Yeah, you go, okay, and then you want to do that more, right? And that's sort of like anything. But I felt after a while that I always knew, and maybe you feel this way about boxing, and you could tell me, but since you kind of grew up around it, I always go back to it as a place where I feel the most comfortable. Like, I know that I don't know everything, hardly, but I do know how to ask questions about what I want to know. I kind of know what I don't know in that arena, and I know I kind of know what I do know. I know some of my limits. I know how to push myself. I know, those kind of things in that art form. And so it's where I always kept feeling comfortable along the way.
I can relate. It's kind of like, getting your degree, but still having continued education. And even though you're a specialist yourself, there's still more that you learn, more avenues you can go, more things you can participate in, so I definitely can relate with that. Now, do you remember getting your first gig 40 plus years ago?
Well, we were, my parents, my dad and my dad's side of the family were all musicians. And so my dad was a professional drummer for a lot of years, in addition to being a teacher. And my uncles played guitar, and my grandparents sang a lot. So my dad, they played, weddings and parties and stuff like that growing up, and clubs and things on the weekends. And the kids, so all of our kids, so my cousins and I, we had this band called the Third Generation, because we were like the third of this musical family. And so we would go around and sing for retirement communities and different things like that. So when I was 4 or 5 years old, I was doing that.
So the stage was nothing to you, you're just, it was life. Yeah. I get on here and, you really don't know until you talk to someone how much you guys have in common. And time again, I interview somebody, and the parallels in our lives are like that, because, it's kind of vulgar, but people ask me when I start boxing, and I tell them that I was in my dad's nuts when he was fighting for the world championship, that's how long I've been boxing. So, and I get kind of hard, and maybe we can have a conversation about this on some of my fighters, because I'm like, this is something that should be easy, or this is something that you shouldn't be scared of. But I kind of don't take into accountability that it's something I've been doing since birth. Do you ever come across that with other actors where you're like, I've been doing this for 40 plus years, but you know, this is nothing. You're encouraging them sometimes, but then to me, it's frustrating sometimes too. It's like, why can't you be like me?
Yeah, yeah. I got a real gift in my career, which it was my children. We didn't expect to have them as early as we did, but in '95, my daughter was born, and I was teaching at Oklahoma City University as a adjunct theater professor. And so I got a chance for a few years before we moved back up here to continue working. I got a few years to be in the classroom at the collegiate level. And so I had to explain what came naturally to me, or what I had picked up in the classroom that I just had absorbed and whatever and brought into my own practice. And so when students would come in to my studio and we would be working on something, maybe a song or maybe a monologue or whatever, I'd have to think about what I do and then try to articulate that to them and say, you know, because I'd be like, oh, I just naturally breathe here. I just naturally do this, you know. Exactly. And they go, oh, you have to breathe here? How do I breathe? And I go, well, what do you mean, how do you breathe? Right? So,
exactly. And I probably did that to you. Because people ask me, where do you look? I mean, like, what do you mean, where do you look?
Right.
You just look. And at a certain point, you get so good that you don't have to look anymore. You just feel. Maybe acting, you know, I've been on sets before, and we'll get into that later, but these actors, they'll be laughing 1 second, then cut it on the next. Do you notice? Obviously, you notice that, but that's like a natural feeling for them. How do you do? I can't do it.
It's interesting because you're kind of going to that place. Like, have you ever been maybe come into a room and somebody's watching television and they're really into the program, and you walk into the room and, you know, and you say, my wife is Sarah. And so maybe Sarah's watching TV and she's really in the program, like, hey, Sarah. And she doesn't hear me. And I go, Sarah. And she snaps out of it, kind of thing.
Right.
She's in that world of that program. Like, you're kind of literally in this other place, right? And so in that similar sort of sense, if you've, you know, done the work and created the character, and, you know, you've rehearsed and you know sort of the essence of where the character is and where the scene is going, when it's time to go, when that action is called, it's almost sort of like that, where you turn into this other world in a similar way of, you know, watching television and being engrossed in the program. You're now engrossed in the scene itself with the other actor or with whatever's going on. So you don't see the camera, you don't see the audience, you just are in that other world that you've been creating.
You become that person.
In that moment.
That seems like a very hard thing to develop, because not only do you have to be in that, everyone that's in the scene has to be in the same world. It's almost like Dungeons and Dragons. I don't know how to put it, but for a normal person, how do you put yourself in that? I know you're studying and you know you have passion for it, but it's almost like you're acting. Right. How do you do that?
Well, it's sort of like one of the things that was, when you talked about how did I know sort of when I kind of wanted to do it, one of the things I realized is that everything that I did growing up, whether it was playing sports or whatever, I really wanted to be it. And so for example, this perfect example is here at the gym, right? So if I'm going to come into the gym and work out here as a boxer, then I'm going to be a boxer. I need to get boxing shoes. I'm going to wrap my hands. I'm going to learn how to do all of that. I'm going to, you know, get gloves that fit me. I'm going to, you know, learn what to do. And so in a sense, Scott comes in and becomes a boxer. So, you know, if I work at Walmart, I put on the uniform with a vest, and I go in and I do the things that a Walmart person does behind the register or stocks or whatever, right? So that's a similar thing, except now I'm just doing whatever this other character is. So one of the ways I got to know you is that I was doing Rocky, the musical, at the Walnut Street Theater, and one of the things I did was one of the commentators. So I had to watch a lot of old fights from the 70s to kind of hear that style. And so once I got that information, then it was like, well, what do they do? So you just kind of do what the job is.
Right. Now, you actually studied and you actually learned the character. Would you say that imagination plays a big part in being able to be a good actor or not? Because to me it sounds like I don't have a good enough imagination to immerse myself into a different world. I never really was like that. I have a son who can just think of something, imagine it, draw it, you know. Me, not so much. So maybe that might be my downfall with acting. But would you say imagination is important?
It is imagination. It's imagination within sort of the structure of whatever the script might be, right? But it's something that we all do. It's just a question of what the boundaries and the parameters are. So, for example, you know, you come in when you do a fight, when you're fighting someone, you come into that ring with a character, right? Like in the sense, like this is Tim Witherspoon Jr., the fighter now. We're not here to be talking on the radio.
I can play that character whenever I want.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about playing it in the wrestling ring. The same character, you know, so I get it.
Yeah. It's more of a question of figuring out what this character literally, what do they do? Right. How do they hold themselves? How do they how does that, what does this person want in the scene? So if you're in a fight, you want your opponent to be intimidated. So you do those things that intimidate, that kind of thing. You figure out what you're doing.
I feel like the special ones though, like let's say Jim Carrey, for instance, can play multiple different people. I only have one I only have one character in my backpack, you know. But there's guys like Jim Carrey, like I said, who can play a serious character or play a very animated character. You know, or the range, I guess you could say, is very important for an actor too. I guess that might depend on if you are just labeled as the single female on every movie, or you get cast as an action hero along with a heartthrob, you know.
Right.
Diversity, I guess, is in range. Diversity in range is a big part of acting.
Yeah. I mean, I have a face for radio. So, so I'm not going to be, you know, I don't play many leading men. So I get the opportunity to play a lot of the, you know, what we refer to as a character actor, right? Which I think is kind of a bit of a misnomer, because anybody who's acting a character is a character actor. That's what you do. But the idea of it in the industry is that, you know, you're maybe going to be somebody that can play something more versatile, like, you know, a Philip Seymour Hoffman, or like you said, a Jim Carrey, or a, you know, Daniel Day-Lewis. Those are the, you know, actors I really look up to. That, you know, Denzel Washington. You never know who he's coming at you with next, you know, and what next, you know. Yeah.
I like what's his name? Scarface. Al Pacino.
Al Pacino.
Yeah. He's one of those kind of guys. You see him in Scarface, and you see him in Any Given Sunday.
Right.
He's kind of violent in The Godfather too, right? He's one of my favorite actors. Who do you really look up to?
Yeah, I mean, all the ones we just mentioned. I've been on a real big Denzel kick lately. A movie that he did that really impacted me. And maybe there are films or things like this in your life that at a time you're going through something, a piece of art comes your way. It was I can't think of the name of it now. He's an airplane pilot.
Yeah, Airplane, I think it's called. When he's an alcoholic.
Yeah, he's an alcoholic, and he
Flight.
Thank you. I don't know the name.
Flight. That's a very good movie.
That movie came to me at a real particular point in my life, and then I just started. I kind of get like this when I find an artist or rediscover an artist that maybe I had a passing knowledge of or didn't really dig into, and then something comes along and I'm like, okay, so then you just watch all their movies and like continue to follow what they do. And so he's one of them. You know, somebody like Marlon Brando, who I think just changed the way people act in film. He just, you know, the way he did what he did.
Yeah, for me, it was more music that, you know, I had to keep studying and brought me out and gave me that passion. But film is something that I have to try a little bit harder on when it comes to, I guess you would call them dramas, or I'm more of a documentary kind of guy myself, which has a lot of acting in it sometimes. So let's talk about actually acting as far as the day goes, how long and painstaking it is. Like I told you before, I was an extra on Creed, and it was the most grueling thing. And I was just pantomiming, just fake talking. How do you last throughout a whole day of acting, changing the camera position without getting frustrated?
It is frustrating. Yeah, I don't know if you ever really sort of lose that feeling of it. It's just a question of learning how to manage it. And if it's frustrating, it's just the stopping and the starting. Right. Just kind of getting ramped up for something and then having to stop and wind it down. And that is difficult. In some ways, in theater and film are different in many ways, but probably in the most one of the most crucial ways, it's that anytime I'm doing a theater piece, like if I get there, and the curtain's at 8 o'clock and it's over at 10:30, I know how long it's going to take from 8 to 10:30, and I know what those characters are going to do, and it finishes the same every night, and so there's a sense of there's a real sense of sort of comfort in knowing how your workday is going to go.
A little bit more organized.
Yeah, in that sense. So film is a little more difficult for me for those reasons that you mentioned, because it's a lot of films are shot out of order. So you're not even necessarily sure when this scene is going to fit in the arc of the story. So
you don't even know if it's going to be in the story.
Right. Yeah, I've been cut from many films. So that absolutely happens.
So let's talk about theater a little bit, because to me, I equate that as a boxing match. You know that curtain's going to open and then the crowd's going to be there and you have to perform flawlessly. How is it being behind that stage? You probably hear the crowd talking to each other, and then you hear the
5 minutes.
Yeah, did you how was that feeling when you're about to walk out, do that ring walk?
It's funny because when I didn't realize that in the boxing world you call an event a show. I loved that when I started hearing that more often, like we've got a show, and you're talking about the whole undercard and everything, the main event, and I just thought, well, that makes sense. It's entertainment, and there you go. And so there are a lot of parallels in that way. It's similar in that you've prepared, you've rehearsed, in a sense, the combinations, and have this plan of what you're going to do. And there's still this sense that it might not go the way you rehearsed, because it's live, it's happening as it's happening. And so you're trying to execute the plan and also be prepared for things that might not go the way you rehearsed, right? So in that similar way. But yeah, it's going back to earlier in the conversation, it's that connection between the energy that we're giving out on stage in the performing of the piece and putting it out to the audience, and then the audience is receiving that energy, and then if they're engaged, they send that energy back, and so it's that feeling of this connection that I enjoy.
Now, between you and the other actors, you guys all have to coordinate all at the same time, is there any tools or anything that you guys use while you're doing a live show? Like if someone messes up, there's a cue or something like that, or do you guys just fix it on the spot, freestyle, and put the show back on the right path?
Well, there's actually a lot of that goes on, all of those things that you just said. So sometimes it's dancing around, sort of figuring out the improv. But we have, in theater, you have a stage manager for every show, and that stage manager is usually, sort of in the booth, maybe in the back of the house, sort of looking down at the stage, has their monitor, and they're on a headset with other stage managers backstage and different things. So if something goes wrong with a set piece or something goes wacky that way, they can get down and communicate to the other stage managers what to do and stuff like that if there's that kind of an accident.
Right.
I was doing a production of Spamalot, and we were in previews, and this bar that held some lights fell about 2 or 3 feet right behind me to the ground, to the stage, and just crashed in the middle of it. In the performance. So we had to stop. You said, okay, you just can't fix that. You gotta stop. Right. And then reset everything, and we started again. But so I've had it happen a few times where you just have to stop the show.
Right.
But mostly you can dance around it.
So I've had shows, boxing matches, where I remember one time I was fighting in an island called Jersey over in the UK. It's actually off the coast of France anyway. I'm in the middle of fighting a guy, and the lights turn off in the arena.
In the middle of the fight.
So we had to stop the show until they put the lights back on. But at that point, it could go either way. I could be dominating, and then all of a sudden I'm cold. That lights could switch the whole show. Could that happen to an actor? Lights switch the whole show.
We were doing Love Story, the musical at the Walnut, and it was a one act. It was about a 95-minute show with no intermission, and about halfway through, the lead woman is standing downstage and she's facing out into the audience, as she does every night for the scene. And she just says, hold, hang on, hold. Somebody in the audience had kind of gotten up and was stumbling and had fallen down and was having some kind of medical emergency. So they had to come in, and luckily, the person was okay, but they had to bring the ambulance in, stop everything cold like that. So a similar situation to the fight, and you're just like, okay, we're in the middle of the story, and now what? Now we have an intermission where we've never had one before, and where do we start when we go back out? And But that's the beauty of live theater. It's different all the time.
Is live theater one of your passions? Is that something that you enjoy doing, overall acting?
It is, and it's what I have the most experience in. But I am really interested in doing a lot more film and television because of just the art of it. It's just so much. It's so much more about the camera, what the camera sees, what the director. It's really a director's medium. What they want to show and how they want to show the story, and so you really become almost a model in a way. And like I said, a lot of times it shoots out of order. Things shoot out of order, so you don't know. You're just playing that scene where. So I like that because it's really concentrated. A moment, the scene. It's just a moment. But theater, like I said, you're taking that story every night. There's comfort in knowing where it's going to go every night.
So, what are some of the biggest productions that you've been a part of?
Well, one of them was just recently, this production of Rocky the Musical at the Walnut, because it, it ran on Broadway for a while in 2014, I think, but didn't go on tour because it had a lot to do with the ring going out into the audience for the big fight at the end, and it was, it was a real spectacular show. But the composers wanted to remount it and, maybe try to get it into a situation where it could go on a tour.
Right.
I said it didn't have to be about the, special effects in the ring, but something a little different. And so they rewrote some of the book and redid some of the songs. And so we, at the Walnut Street Theater, we were the first regional theater to do this new script. And so it was pretty important and pretty... It felt really good, and to do it in Philadelphia, the Rocky story, it just,
You have great turnout?
We did. We really sold well, and it was the perfect time to do it, I think, coming out of the pandemic, really, sort of, and it was the first show of the season this year, and just sort of celebrating, sort of, like, let's get back to it, and that Rocky spirit.
Yeah, Rocky is definitely an American kind of fight movie,
right?
But, so... let's clear this up, because I'm a little bit confused on the whole Rocky and the licensing, because the local high school had the production of Rocky, and they were claiming that they were the first people to do the production. How does that? Was it a different production than the one that you did, or? Yeah.
Okay. So, no, that was great. Yeah, that was right over here at the high school, right? The local Truman High School.
The kids for the fight scene.
Yeah, that was fantastic. And Yeah, so the Broadway version happened, and then you can put it up for licensing, and so the school did it first.
Okay.
And what happened since then was that they rewrote some of the dialogue and restructured some of the songs. They took a couple of songs away from one character into another. Just sort of restructured some things. The story is still the same movie, Rocky story that you love, but so this new version got its premiere at the Walnut. So this will be what, if regional theaters or other high schools want to do it in the future, this will be the version that they'll do. Okay. So that Truman High School one, if you got a chance to see that would have been the only version of that.
2 kids.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of moving parts to it.
Yeah.
A lot of pushing things on stage. I don't know if yours was like this. A lot of rolling things off stage. A lot of scene changes. A lot of they have a big projector screen that plays like Philadelphia in the background.
Oh, nice.
When he's running up the Rocky steps, they have a nice projection of it and everything. Is there a lot of moving compartments, a lot of stage hands that need to be there for your production? Yeah,
we had the big Rocky steps and all that kind of thing. And that's one of the things that I love about working at the Walnut is that their sets and their lights and their contraptions are just top drawer. So that was a lot of fun to do. We had a great time with all of those things.
There's so many parts that put on the show that the crowd, the audience, you might notice, but you just don't know what's going on back there. The hecticness of it, costume changes, and all that. And then you guys come out and they turn the lights on, and it's right into a song. it's like none of the chaos even happens, that is a really good art. I can't stop comparing it to boxing, because a boxer will be nervous all the way up until the bell rings, then boom, it's showtime, man. Acting and fighting is so close. I'd rather fight though. Them long days. And maybe let's transition this, because maybe something else that is similar to I don't know. Or maybe it's not. It's the business side of acting. I have no idea how it goes or how it is to be an actor for a living. I know when I was the extra that time, that I got paid really well, somewhere. I'll just say it, like near like $600 for like 2 days of work, and the best food I've ever had. They had the craft services, and everything. But I don't know how much Michael B. Jordan got paid, but I know that they must get paid a lot, because it's a lot of work. Like I said, I wanted to throw up just pantomiming, just fake talking. For you, the business side of things, do you see the reward in being an actor? Is it something that you're like, this was a good idea? Yeah. Some boxers have, regret. Some boxers have regret.
Yeah, no, I do. I took a long time trying to figure out how to make that balance happen, because, if you work too much, you get burned out. You imagine that's the same in fighting. You can't fight all the time. You need that time to heal, gather, learn new things. And so to balance that time between when you're working, when you're not working. And so in a time like now, for example, this is a time when I'm not working, so your job becomes to get another job, and to make sure. One of the things about boxing I think is really brilliant in the professional game is the way a person might, get injured a day or two before the fight or whatever, and somebody else gets called up to do, because you can't cancel that show, right? So in a sense, it's sort of like an understudy, right? Yeah. And if that guy who gets called up, or gal gets called up to fight and wins, what that can do to their life. And the same thing if an understudy goes on and they end up killing, like, wow, who knows what their career could be, right? So it's being ready to step in at that moment's notice. It's always being ready. It's always... So, in a sense, I'm working harder right now than I am when I'm in a show, because I'm learning this audition piece and hustling for that audition, and my agent, I'm on the phone with them all the time, and
Right. And how, I was going to ask you, so you have an agent, so that's basically how you go about getting work. You just go through there, or Are you part of the Actors Union?
There's a couple of ways to go. I am a member of the Actors Union, and I do have an agent out of New York, and so there are a lot of things that I do that I go through my agent with. Then there are other things like, say you want to put on a boxing show, you kind of find your own work, you put together your own fights or whatever, like I don't know, but that kind of thing. So I also work on my own thing. So I might have a solo show that I'm writing right now that I might work with a theater and try to work my own thing, So you're always on the lookout for work you can create or being involved in someone else's project,
right.
Being available for that.
It's a bit of a grind, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess, rewarding enough to make it your career and everything. So that's great. I had a question about the people in the industry and how we see all these big time Hollywood people that are, I don't want to offend anybody, but Hollywood's kind of out there. On the level of theaters and local productions and all that, is there much drama out there? Do you see that in between actors, even fights, stealing jobs, or let's get some juice?
Well, it's funny because there is the kids who are in the drama club in high school were the kids who were, in the drama club. They're drama because that's what they love is drama. And so you sort of have that drama in your life, and all of that. And so those folks are going to be, in this business too, that you just sort of love the drama. But at this level, and like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, so it's pretty remarkable how it doesn't take too terribly long to understand that it's work. You go, you show up, you clock in, you do your job, you go home.
Right.
I don't bring my work home. I mean, I do in terms of study and whatever, but whatever happens on the set or whatever, you shake that off and you go home and you recover.
Have you ever been on the set where you're like, man, this other person's making this unbearable?
Yeah. I did a film in the 90s called Melvin, A Midwestern Tale, and we were filming in Oklahoma, out in middle of Oklahoma in farmland, and so we were out there for a couple of days in a couple of trailers, and there were some folks that made it a little more difficult to get along, but you just sort of go, okay, well, I'm here to do this gig, and you just try to be as professional as you can. I imagine it would be the same in any workplace, really, at the end of the day,
You mentioned earlier that you like to write a little bit too. Is that something that you have, is it like a side gig, or it's just a passion of yours? Or
I do write. I write. I have a couple of books available on Amazon, but one of the side jobs that I do now that I've consistently done is I write and host a podcast called God and Autobiography. And so I write for that podcast, and it's pretty much an ongoing deal that, like I said, when you're trying to create your own work, you're always trying to come up with something that you can do. I realized, it's been a while now that I've realized that, hey, if you're auditioning and maybe you're not getting some things and folks want to work with other people, then that's great. So you got to make your own work.
Right, and in this day and age with technology and social media, it changes the landscape a bit, right? You can have your own show on YouTube if you want to. Your podcast is an example. What we're on right now is an example. But tell us more about your podcast and what it means or what it is.
Yeah. Well, it's called God and Autobiography, the podcast, and it started out right before we shut down for the pandemic. So just like February of 2020, and I had a year and a half worth of theater work lined up, and I was about to go to Florida to do a show, and I was looking on Craigslist for a writing gig, maybe a side thing I could do, because I had been doing some articles for some people and things, and I happened upon this article or this Craigslist ad. This retired philosophy professor had written a book. He lives in Doylestown, and essentially I got hired to make it into an audiobook. And the way the book read, it's really a lot of dialogue, so it felt very dramatic. So I said, well, why don't we turn this into like a radio program, like an old radio? And he thought, yeah. So I wrote the scripts for that based on the book, and then we made it into the first 44 episodes of the podcast are the audio adaptation of the book. And we didn't have any plans after that, but after it was over, I mean, we dropped an episode every week. So after the first 44 episodes, we kept going, and so we changed the format to more of a conversational format about the book and about philosophy and about world religions and just everyday living. And we're on episode 117 now.
Wow.
So one episode a week.
Nice.
Yeah.
So after, you're saying you did 44 episodes of the book,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have...
We just kept going.
Yeah, but what do you?
Yeah.
So anything, I guess.
Well, we bring on. We have the person who wrote the book. His name is Jerry Martin, and he was a head of the philosophy department for years at the University of Colorado in Boulder. And his wife is also a retired philosophy professor. She taught at Brooklyn College, and they have retired to Doylestown, so this was about, like I said, making the audio adaptation of the book, but now we invite philosophers and religious studies experts, and we also have an episode, we answer emails of folks who write in and stuff like that. So it's a little bit of everything like that. Yeah.
Right. And it's quite different than maybe like 10 years ago, right? As an actor, I guess, maybe 10 years ago, not everybody was on YouTube or making podcasts. Now everybody has it. Do you have some favorite inspirations of your own? In terms of podcasts and stuff? Podcasts, or, some people like tutorials. I know people come in here all the time. Oh, this is how you wrap your hands. I'll learn from this guy. And I say, no. That's right. But what's some of the content you like to consume online? Yeah, it's interesting because when this pandemic happened, I realized a lot about how I learn things, and how I predominantly learn is through audio and visual. So I found myself spending a lot of time on YouTube. And I mean, content from all kinds of content, from how to do things, people just offering their tutorials about this. I really took my photography to another level during the pandemic. So I spent a lot of time on YouTube learning how to, do photography and stuff, different people's takes on stuff like that. Right. When I started boxing, like I said, one of the reasons I came here is that I was trying to get some info and language about the boxing world in order to do Rocky. And I realized as I was doing research on YouTube, watching some of these older fights, and a couple of your dad's fights were some that I was watching, I realized I had seen a lot of those fights. Right. Like at the time, and I knew a lot of these names, and I was realizing I think I really have had a passion for boxing for a long time, but no availability to a gym where I grew up, so I never really explored that. But just the boxing entertainment, like I love boxing movies that are done really well. Right. I'm very sort of, you probably even more than I am, but I'm very critical about a boxing movie. Like I feel like it's got to be done well, and Well, for me, I go into it already expecting that it's not realistic, but some movies have done great. One of my favorite ones are Cinderella Man. Yeah. It's a great one about the Great Depression. And $1 Million Baby is a good one. But when it comes to two things that have to do with boxing, one movies and one's video games, I'm not expecting it to be like the real thing. The movies, I understand that they have to make it dramatic and everything. The video games are just because I suck at it. They're probably really realistic, but I'm just horrible at boxing video games. But you're here. Does your family support your boxing career? Everything. I would expect them to be like, okay, he did Rocky. I understand. This is You know, do they even know how far you're going? Do they know you've sparred before and everything?
My wife does, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I had to get her permission, of course, to do it. No, it is, when you talk about the similarities between acting and boxing and stuff, it really came down to the concentration of it all, you know, and just the training of it. Even if I never got into another ring, you know, to spar or to fight, just the idea of the concentration level that you've got to be on really at every moment. And the stakes in theater are very high. If you know, everyone's watching, you're in that moment. But they're not so high that someone's going to punch you in the face. So it's even another level of sort of, and it's helped me because, and you've even seen it in me, where like I'll get really tense and sort of focused up, you know, and you breathe. You have to learn how to breathe and sort of focus and all of that. And that's what you have to do in the theater too. If you get caught up in that moment, if something goes wrong, or, you know, like if you come out and you expect to throw that jab and then go for and he hits you with it throws your game plan off. What do you do? Same thing, you go out, the person doesn't come in when they're supposed to. What do I do now? Same deal, right? You have to learn how to control yourself. So
you're describing a fight. You know, they're both fights. How would you tell a young actor to prepare for the fight? What would you get? What kind of advice would you give them?
I have found for me that it starts with the breathing, with my breath. When my mind just goes all different directions and you just kind of panic, to just breathe, just start there. And then I feel like once I do that, there's a way, it just facilitates this sort of ability to look around, literally and figuratively. So sort of assessing your situation. And once you've sort of assessed your situation, well, how do you move forward? So with fighting, with acting, with anything, I would tell all of my students that whatever you're approaching, you panic, where am I? Breathe, assess, then what's the next step?
Yeah, but what I'm thinking about acting, I'm like, I don't have enough time to breathe. We only have 4 nanoseconds before I'm supposed to talk. You know, how can you do you literally turn that 4 nanoseconds into 10 seconds in your head while you're acting? Or
in a sense, I guess it is that, because you know, when you coach me about being in the ring, I imagine, you know, you see a much bigger picture and a lot more options, and especially like when you're fighting. So like when you and I were sparring, for example, I'm sure that when you were looking at me, you saw a lot more options of things you could do than what I could see with you. Same thing, the more you're experienced as an actor, the more options you have straight away. So if something panics, you have a list of, let's say, 15 options. As opposed to only 2 that you think you have.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm doing what people do to me, which is they ask me, when can I have a fight, and I always tell them it depends on you. The time that you put in, that's what you get out of it. You know. So acting is obviously the same way. The time you put in, is the time you get out of it. Me though, when I go into acting, I'm gonna just go right to the top. Right off the bat with no training, I'm just going to go. Obviously not. I can't even do it on our podcast like that. But so we've been here talking for maybe about 45-50 minutes, and
it's gone by quick.
Yeah, we've had a pretty good conversation. At the end of my podcast, I like to give my guests a chance to spread any message that they want to spread to the world, good, bad, different. I think we had another actor on here who told everyone to go fuck themselves. He called my next guest a drug dealer. Okay. So it doesn't have to be positive, but I'm pretty sure it will be. Well,
you know, you and I talked about this a little bit, and it's something that I've written about extensively, and I've talked about in videos on my own channel, so it's nothing that's brand new. But I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder in 1999, and it's not an easy thing to live with. It's not an easy thing to deal with, and there were a lot of difficulties and a lot of changes in my life because of a lot of bad decisions. And it can feel sometimes like you're, maybe spiraling, and you just don't know where to turn. But mental health is something that is worth seeking help for, because we all go through times when we're sad. We all go through times when things are difficult. We all go through times when things seem like they're impossible, and we can sometimes make really difficult decisions that can cost us deeply in the end. And so that idea of being able to sort of just take time to breathe, assess, and reach out to someone, I feel like if I could have reached out to someone sooner, things might be different than they are. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, you go through the situation that you're meant to go through. And right now, at this very moment, you're in the place that you're supposed to be in. Why? How do I know that? Because that's where you are. Anywhere else is a story.
Right.
Here's where you are. And so everything that's led you to where you are right now has been valuable for you to be right here, right now. And so where you go from here means everything.
Nicely said, and I agree with you. All right, guys, that's our show for today. We have actor and teacher Scott Langdon on the Young Black Suburban. If you like what you see, please like, share, and subscribe. See you guys in the next one.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. That was a great interview.